And we are back with the Dr. Joe Show with Dr. Gale Sinatra talking about science and those that may deny science.
Yes, we are indeed. And so I'm curious, the I am approach has two truths, right? The idea is that because the four domains, your home, your social, the biological, and the IC interconnect, small changes can have big effects. So usually we wait towards the end of the show, but I think I'd like to bring this in here. What small change can you recommend about science denial, doubt, and resistance? How do we address this?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I think that one of the things we tried to do in the book is talk about what different types of individuals could do to work through these issues. So we have recommendations in each chapter, and then chapter 8, we have a full chapter on recommendations for individuals, for educators, for scientists, for science communicators, and for policymakers about what they can do, what individual steps that they can take. So I would say a small change step that would be very impactful. And I'm going to have to back up a little and give you a little bit about something that you know a lot about, which is the difference between System 1 and System 2 thinking. So for your audience, the System 1 thinking is our quick reaction, and it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction. And System 2 thinking is the more reflective and thoughtful approach to problem solving. This comes from Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winning psychologist, and it relates very much in your model to the theory of mind. So what small change can individuals make? Well, I think a small change that we can all make is to stop our System 1 quick knee-jerk reaction to when we see something on Facebook or on Twitter, or to when we hear someone make a claim. And instead of just going with our knee-jerk reaction of dismissing it, disrespecting it, distrusting it, stop for just 1 second and reflect. Why am I reacting strongly to this person's mask wearing in a restaurant? If they want to wear their mask in the restaurant, why is that bothering me? Maybe they have an immunocompromised son at home. Like, stop just for a second and think. Instead of having that knee-jerk reaction, stop for a second and weigh the possibilities. And we've talked to a few people who've read the book who've said they've actually had a few conversations which went better after they read the book, because they said, I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm just going to stop for a second and reflect on my own reaction, my own feeling about what that post says, what that clickbait headline says, what my neighbor said, what this guy in line at Starbucks said. I'm going to just stop, reflect for a minute, think about the context of that person, show that person some respect. And that, I think, would make a large difference from a small change.
Yeah. And that is totally in line with the I am approach. Absolutely. And instead of System 1 or System 2, we will say the limbic system versus the prefrontal cortex. This limbic, impulsive, irrational sometimes, and then the prefrontal thinking things through and reflecting and wondering. One of the things that we say is it's much more rewarding to wonder than to worry, and it's much more important to be reflective than reflexive. And so I think this fits right in. And so
that's the connection in your model between the brain and the body, right? So that connection of where these processes are located, the System 1, System 2, is exactly what you said. So it's all coming together right there.
Yeah. Mark, you got something? You look like you're getting a little eager.
No.
So the other thing is, and what what I think both of our models are talking about and what you're talking about is just because we disagree with someone doesn't mean we value them less. And to come back to this concept of value, I think that some people think that because another person isn't getting vaccinated, or did you hear my dog back there? That was Bella. Bella's letting me know that somebody's coming home. That somehow they are devaluing another person. And then we will then react. We speak about mirror neurons on the Dr. Joe show, and the idea that we respond to somebody else's emotional response. And that's another thing that we can step back and look again. Why are they doing what they're doing? And I'm not going to activate my mirror neurons based on yours. Instead, what I'm going to do is treat you with respect and hopefully activate your mirror neurons. So how do people have the discussion? How do we have the discussion in a rational, prefrontal way, in a system 2 way, when one person denies and one person is on the other side?
Well, back in the day in Massachusetts, and I think you still do this, you used to have town halls. And I
Yes.
don't know if that's still a thing, but it was when I was growing up. So long before the internet, when a small town in Massachusetts needed to make a decision about whether they were going to fund a new playground, the people came together and discussed the pros and cons. We don't do any of that anymore. We're all in our information bubbles on the internet, and we don't talk to people with different points of view. And we don't even appreciate what those other points of view are because we've never heard them. And so there are people on either sides of an issue that are very intolerant of the other side. But have they talked to anyone on that side? Have they had a conversation? So we would say, talk to people, who have different points of view, treat them with respect, listen to their points of view. And everyone doesn't do enough of that anymore. We just live in the internet. We live in our information bubbles. We're quick to dismiss people who think differently than we do. And that's not helping us solve global problems like pandemics and climate change.
So we're fortunate in our town, we actually do have town hall and town meetings. And they can be quite volatile at sometimes, where people are but getting up, but they get to say their point of view. It's interesting because as you were speaking, I thought science denial is not just about denying the science, but sometimes we deny each other and then
Well,
are
I think you're right.
astonished.
I think what you mentioned about values, people are too dismissive of other people's values and too suspect of those values, and too willing to characterize people's beliefs and values as extreme on one side or the other. And that's not helping us get anywhere.
Very interesting. I think that there's one other component to this that I'd like to discuss, which is the interim, which is the resistance. In my field in psychiatry, resistance is what we are always struggling with, where somebody is resistant to exploring what's really going on with them. And the I am breaks right through resistance, because the I am is saying, I'm not going to judge you. We're not judging you. And sometimes in resistance, it's not always the secret that's important. It's why somebody thinks it should be secret. But in this case, there seems to be this evolution. There's the doubt, and then the resistance, and then the denial. Am I missing the sequence here, or?
I'm not sure if there's a sequence. I think you could,
Okay.
could certainly argue that direction, but there could be a different sequence I could envision. But in terms
Okay.
of resistance, you as a psychiatrist know better than anyone that what you're resisting is often something other than what you're resisting,
Mhm.
right? So when you are in resistance, again, stop and reflect on, or get help from someone reflecting on what that resistance is really rooted in. Because as you say, is it really rooted in the actual science itself, or is it rooted in something else? Is it rooted in some value, or is it rooted in some view of a political stance? Is it rooted in some identity? So it's often trying to decouple the science from what the resistance is really about. As Stephen Jay Gould used to say, there are no moral lessons in nature. It just is what it is. We, may be very unhappy um, to see the way nature works. It's not always pleasant, but we should not be drawing our moral lessons from nature. We should
Yeah.
be considering other ways to establish values.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree about that morality. Stephen Jay Gould was absolutely one of my heroes, um, who I think influenced one of my phrases about substance use, that addiction is not about morality, it's about mortality. It's just the way the brain works. So is there part of that here? Are we just looking at the way the brain works? That for some people, there seems to be a fear of having their rights taken away. And I think, that is the politicization, unfortunately, of science. As somebody is saying, why are you telling me to wear a mask? Why are you telling me to do this? And that then maybe supersedes the science because there's now another issue here. Is that part of what
Right.
you?
So exactly. So is that really about the mask wearing, or is it really about something else? Is it really about, not wanting, regulations, or wanting a certain, freedom? Um, I remember back in Massachusetts when I was a kid and we got the seatbelt law. I thought that
Right,
people were going to lose their minds. The thought
right.
of wearing seatbelts, people thought it was just, incredible beyond belief that we could impose such an incredible restriction. And yet today, no one really thinks twice about putting on a seatbelt. What about smoking in restaurants? Remember when that was banned and people said, that's it, that's the end of restaurants. There'll never be people going to restaurants anymore. Bars will close. It's all over. Well, of course, none of that happened. So the resistance is often about something else. You're not ready to change that part of your lifestyle. I think that's a lot of it with climate change. People think we're going to have to all go live in a yurt someplace. That's
Mm.
not what anyone I think is suggesting, but you will have to potentially make some changes in your lifestyle, and people aren't really always willing to do that because they fear the change will be much worse than it is. I have an electric car. I love it. It's really snappy, zippy. I have solar panels on my roof, so the sun powers my car. It's awesome. I don't pay for gas in 8 years. I don't know why people resist electric cars. They're awesome. But I think it's because they feel that they won't won't be awesome. So often these changes are, you're fearful of them, resistant to them because you think it's going to be a hardship, it's going to be negative, it's going to impact your lifestyle. But most of the time, these changes are either inconsequential, like wearing a seatbelt, really not going to end businesses, like restaurants are still open, and driving an electric car isn't a sacrifice. It's a lot of fun.
Mark, you got a comment on that?
Well, especially if there's AI involved in that electric car, then it's really fun.
There seems to be
Yeah.
AI everywhere these days, so
Wow.
I'm sure it is in electric cars.
And that's also a whole nother topic of perhaps why people are also so concerned. What is happening? Yeah, or afraid.
Yeah, self-driving cars, that is kind of odd and kind of
Exciting.
exciting for some people and a little terrifying for others. But we always feel that way about change, no matter
Right.
what the change
Yeah.
is. So we just have to look at whether that change is really as drastic and monumental as we think it is, or if it actually brings something positive into our lives.
Well, with that in mind, we spoke about the first truth of the I am. Small changes have big effects. The second truth, because everyone is interested in what you think or feel about them. And that's the I see domain. And that has an effect on their biological domain, because it feels differently when you feel that you're being treated with respect or disrespect. This means you control no one, you influence everyone. You get to choose the kind of influence you want to be. Dr. Sinatra, what kind of influence do you want to be?
Well, as a professor currently teaching freshmen, I want to influence the next generation by empowering them to achieve their goals, to do great things, to solve the climate crisis, to invent new technologies, to change the course of this world for the better. So I'd like to influence them, and I hope I do in my teaching.
I think that's wonderful. And I sure can only imagine what it must be like to be one of your students. They must be, I hope, very, very grateful.
I always learn as much from them as they learn from me.
Yeah, that's so true. I call my patients my patient teachers, because I learned so much from them. Dr. Sinatra, thank you so much for coming tonight. Real quick, how did I get the book?
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Joe and Mark. You can get the book on Amazon or at your local bookstore. You can ask them to order it for you.
Great. Thank you. All right, folks, we'll be back next week with the Dr. Joe Show. See y'all.
Stretch the kindness, rush with madness. Is it sadness or just a show?